Good morning, everyone. I'm Tracy Noah from the Marion Library Service, and welcome to our Library Through the Lens live webinar, part of our series of adult programs delivered differently. This morning, thanks to Affirm Press, we welcome Sydney-based author Ashley Kalagian Blunt as she talks about her book, How to Be Australian, with author of The Things She Owned, Katherine Arguile. Ashley's debut book, My Name is Revenge, was a finalist in the Carmel Bird Digital Literary Award and was shortlisted for the Woollahra Digital Literary Award. Her writing appears in Griffith Review, Sydney Review of Books, Westerly, The Australian, The Big Issue, and Kill Your Darlings, and she has a Master of Research in Creative Writing. Please feel free at any time during the presentation to type questions you have for Ashley or Katherine into the chat feed on your screen, and I'll ask these at the end of their conversation. Now, please sit back, grab a cuppa, and welcome Ashley and Katherine.
Thanks so much, Tracy, and good morning, Ashley. It's good to see you.
Good morning, Katherine. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. It's not too bad. Are you getting some decent weather over there in Sydney? We've got some lovely sunshine here.
It feels like it went directly from winter to summer in the past 2 days and like transitioned very quickly.
That's something we should be getting used to by now, I guess, that sudden transition. Look, I so enjoyed reading How to Be Australian, and I'm really looking forward to talking about it with you. But before we get on to talking about that, I just wondered whether you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into writing for the benefit of people who haven't followed you yet on social media or read the book. So that, and also a little bit about how you got into writing and how you came to write My Name is Revenge.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Katherine. I feel like I should start by acknowledging the traditional owners of country here, all throughout Australia, but in particular the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on whose lands I wrote much of this book, and pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I have always wanted to be a writer. I'm one of those people who was, a really big reader as a kid. I was always trying to read books wherever I could. I used to walk home from school with an open book, and neighbors would report me to my parents for my dangerous behavior. So yeah, I started writing at a young age. I wrote some terrible novels when I was younger. And then when I was about in my mid-20s, I decided I really, really wanted to write a book about my great-grandparents' survival of the Armenian genocide. And so I started researching that. And that was a process. I did research in the community where they lived in Canada. By the time I'd started, they'd been dead for a few decades. So I was researching with my family and the broader Armenian community. And then I ended up spending a couple months in Armenia and doing research there. I did research here in Australia. I interviewed a lot of people in the Armenian community here in Sydney. So that process went on for a number of years. I wrote a huge book. It was 200,000 words, which is crazy. Yeah, it is an insane length. Like your average book is, for people who don't know, probably about 80,000 words. So we're talking 2.5 times the average book size. So it took many, many, many revisions. Eventually that book morphed into my first book, My Name is Revenge, which it is half fiction, half nonfiction. It starts with the assassination of the Turkish Consul General, which is a historical event that took place here in Sydney in December 1980. We're coming up to the 40-year anniversary of that assassination. The assassins have never been caught. It is an ongoing investigation. We're getting really true crime here. Yeah. Ongoing investigation. There was actually an article recently about how police divers were in Sydney Harbour. They'd gotten a tip-off about some evidence that they could potentially find there, and they did release to the media that they did find, not specifically what they found, but that they brought up some items that were barnacle covered, which I just found fascinating. And there's $1 million reward out for information leading to the people who were responsible for that assassination. It was the Turkish Consul General and his bodyguard were both killed. So yeah, so the book starts with that event, and it fictionalizes the people who could have been involved, because that was part of a worldwide movement that involved over 200 terrorist actions, as the CIA describes them, committed by mainly two groups of Armenian terrorists who were seeking justice for the Armenian genocide by attacking Turkish diplomats around the world.
Revenge, certainly. Yeah.
So
That's sorry, go ahead.
No, so I was just going to say the book starts there, and then the essays at the end provide the context for people so they can understand the broader historical context of the genocide and the situation today, because it's still denied by the Turkish government.
Yes, true, and still topical. Yeah, I really enjoy that sort of combination of essay versus a bit of fiction, and yeah, it may be that it's going to come bursting back onto the scene in a big way if they do find out more things. And
which would be fantastic. Like that. I mean, the people who committed that crime definitely need to be tried and hopefully punished for, if that's still possible.
And at the very least acknowledged.
Yeah.
That's a really important story. And in your book, into How to Be Australian, you talk a little bit about meeting some of the Armenian community members in Sydney, and you talk about your grandparents who escaped the genocide under really very difficult circumstances. So there's a lot of really quite weighty and painful issues that you talk about, certainly about your Armenian heritage. So it's such an interesting contrast that overall the impression reading How to Be Australian, and you look at the cover and it's bright and it's funny as, using the expression. There are so many laugh out loud moments as I read it, and lots of wry recognition, I have to say, because of course I similarly went through a process of acclimatizing to being in Australia. So everything from the puzzlement over how are you going, like you ride a bicycle, and the job application process, a tall poppy syndrome. I laughed aloud when you ate a scroll thinking it was a chocolate scroll only to find it was a Vegemite scroll. And then there are other sort of more beautiful and interesting adjustments that you talk about, like not really recognizing trees and wanting to learn about trees, and the bird sounds, which are very different in Canada, and very different from England as well. One difference I have to say with the Vegemite is that, and I'm going to get lambasted here in the chat, but I'm sorry, but Marmite always, you have to try Marmite, Ashley.
Okay.
That's I think superior, but I'm going to get into a lot of trouble for that.
Uh-oh.
But getting serious for a moment, you also do, within the sort of, you interweave in the laughs in the book, and there are plenty. You have some absolutely wonderful similes woven through. Oh, and before we get on to the serious stuff, I did actually have to talk about your earrings, because while we're talking about strange Australian biscuits, not cookies, Ashley, you tell us in the book that you are not a fan of iced Vovos because of the coconut. So can you confirm you have not yet eaten an iced Vovo?
Specifically desiccated coconut. I just find the texture of desiccated coconut and conceptually and the way it looks horrible, which is why I still have not eaten an iced Vovo. But these earrings, actually, I was doing a similar event a few months ago, and one of the people who joined got in touch with me on social media afterwards to tip me off about these earrings. She's like, you need to own these earrings, and I now own them, and I love them, and they're just, this is my personal brand now, is these earrings.
The iced Vovo that you can't eat.
But I won't eat.
We had a chuckle earlier too, because someone also tipped you off about a limited edition Vovo, right? Which we probably won't have the privilege of watching you eat your debut Vovo, and you might have to follow Ashley on social media to get a view of her eating her first iced Vovo.
I think we could have the worldwide premiere of Ashley eating an iced Vovo right now. These are, for those of you who don't know, these are iced Vovo lamingtons. So they combine two very Australian desserts that I have had a lamington and of course did not like it. But yeah, so let's open up. I've had this package.
Wow.
Let's talk about this by
everyone.
Everyone following me on social media felt it was very important news to let Ashley know that there were iced Vovo lamington crossovers. So let's take a look at these. They look like an iced Vovo, I guess with chocolate added. I guess that's the difference.
It's like a cookie with ice, a sliver of ice. No, it's an iced Vovo with a sliver of lamington on top.
Tracy, I'm sure you've never had an online library event that featured live biscuit trial. Ooh, okay.
This is a first for City of Marion Libraries, so this is wonderful. And that is Lamington on top of iced Vovo. And can I just say, Katherine, I disagree. Promite is the superior spread.
Oh,
I've never heard. What is Promite?
I saw a comment from Di Hoggs agreeing with me on the Marmite, I have to say, but I think we could have an entire webinar about the comparative, what's better, Marmite, Vegemite, and the biscuits in Canada, the UK, and Australia. But we're about to see Ashley eat an iced Vovo. This is.
Oh, yeah, it's so coconutty. It just overpowers. And it overpowers the whole biscuit.
I think we should applaud Ashley for eating the iced Vovo despite her dislike of desiccated coconut.
Anybody wants one?
I would reach out. I have to confess here that I have not yet, in how long have I been here? 13 years.
Oh.
Not yet eaten an iced Vovo.
Oh, we should have coordinated.
I should have
country
a packet, and we could have had a double Vovo eating ceremony.
Next time, Katherine.
I did, when I started working here, I confessed to staff I was working with at the Adelaide Festival Centre that I'd never eaten a Tim Tam, and that really rained down a lot of sort of rage on my shoulders, and I was promptly bought a packet and was shown how to, have you done this yet? Drink your tea out of the corner of a bitten off.
The Tim Tam Slam, yes.
Yeah,
I did not work that into the book, but it should have been there because it's a very important part of Australian culture.
So you've certainly been learning. But just to get serious for a minute now, I think there's so much that's hugely entertaining for me as a recent migrant, probably also a lot for Australians to enjoy, because having somebody from outside show their perception of your own culture is always, I think, fascinating. And I just wanted to ask you what your perception overall of Australian readers' responses have been to reading your book. Because there are these moments of absolutely hilarious moments, and also your struggles settling in. And, they were very sort of honest and heartfelt, and, my heartstrings tugged a bit because I recognize some of those things, but you also address some of the quite serious issues that we found, I also found quite problematic coming here. So issues of offshore processing of asylum seekers, and a certain segment of society here with the sort of casual and maybe not so casual racism, and also the very tricky discussion point of the larrikin laughs on Australia Day versus the sort of true significance of that for first Australians here. So I just wanted to ask you how you navigated that when you began the book, because I felt that it was a really nicely balanced thing. But that's two questions in one. One, how did Australians respond to that? And two, how did you navigate that sort of tricky issue?
Okay, so first of all, how Australians responded. It's lovely because I get two sets of responses to the book, and the responses have been really heartwarming. Like, I love it when readers get in touch with me. Like, people have been emailing me via my website and getting in touch on Instagram and social media. And so I get people like us who have come to Australia and have been, gone through this journey themselves. And it's great because they'll share, things that surprise them. And I've learned all kinds of things from them, and they can definitely relate to all of that. And they talk as well about things that they struggled with, like Australia Day. Mm-hmm. And then I get this response from Australians, which has been so lovely, because really, I knew that people like us would relate to the book and would get a lot out of it and enjoy it. But I really wrote this book for Australians. Like, I really wrote it to both, share my love. It's like a love letter to Australia in a way, but it's, as you say, it's a critical love letter, because I feel like I have to acknowledge, these issues that Australia struggles with and is grappling with, and how I experienced that as a newcomer as well. And so the Australian response has been so lovely, because Australians who've read the book have gotten in touch with me, and when I say that, I mean born and raised Australians, gotten in touch to say how much they've enjoyed it, and that they've learned things about their country. They're always surprised that they learn all these things that they didn't know about Australia, because I've collected all these little tidbits over the years, like one of them being, for example, the Birdman of the Kurong, who is there to represent South Australia. And it's one of my favorite parts of the book. And then they also acknowledge, generally the people who get in touch with me acknowledge that they say, oh, I'm really happy also that you address these more serious aspects, and it's really good to see that. So it's been really rewarding. The response to the book has been really fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, remind me the second part. Oh, how I navigated writing that. Right. Yes, that was very tricky. Mm-hmm. The book started as comedy. It started as pure comedy. But then as I was writing it and as the book developed, I realized that I couldn't talk about, loving Australia and being an Australian, how I developed an Australian identity, without talking about more of the complex aspects of that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, going back to what I was talking about with My Name is Revenge, after spending nearly a decade studying the mechanics of genocide and the ongoing impacts on families and communities who were targeted, I'm acutely aware of the injustice and the moral deficit in Australia's treatment of asylum seekers. And so I felt that, given the immense privilege of becoming a citizen, that also came with a responsibility to be politically engaged and to agitate for change and to talk about these issues and to support the work of organizations doing, great work like the Refugee Council of Australia. And same with Indigenous rights. It's a massive challenge to address such deep-rooted historical injustice, and we have the same, issues in Canada, especially when the reality of that injustice has been largely hidden or denied and remains so unknown by so much of the population. And that's, when I read Bruce Pascoe's Dark Emu, which I mentioned in the book, it just made me aware of how much we don't know about Australia's Indigenous peoples and the incredible knowledge that they had, and how much of that has been destroyed in that ongoing process. And just what a tragedy that is for all of humanity. That's a loss for all of us. Yeah. And so I felt that, becoming a citizen again, I needed to talk about these issues and to continue educating myself by reading Australia's Indigenous authors and supporting and promoting them. So people like Stan Grant and Claire Coleman and Tara June Winch, of course, but even, debut authors. There's an author here in Sydney named Nardi Simpson who's got a book coming out called Tears of the Crocodile. And I'm really, really excited about that. And I'm looking forward to reading that and sharing that with people as well. So yeah, I felt the more I worked on the book, the more I realized you can't have one side you can't have the light side without the serious side. So I'm glad that you felt like the balance came off.
It did come off extremely well, because in the end there is that dissonance that unfortunately we just have to live with in terms of what we observe here and now. The description of the skateboarding with the esky on top coming down the hill, while also being mindful that was on Australia Day on that day, and just being mindful of what that meant, without it never felt in any way kind of hectoring. It was your own sort of discomfort and musings, which came very naturally interspersed with these moments of comedy. And I think sometimes comedy can be a really effective way, or sort of sandwiching these things between moments of humor and sort of humanness really can be really, really effective. So I just wanted to ask then, really, given that when you started the book, I mean, what was it? It was by the time you started it, you've been in Australia, what, five years? Yeah. So, I know certainly, having been here for a while, that my perception of Australia has changed, my attitude towards it has changed, and Australia itself has changed. So I just wanted to ask you, how has your view of Australia changed since you finished the book? And how does that balance against how you feel Australia itself has changed, if that's not a...
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question. And so the book is set from 2011 to 2016. partly because 2016 is when I got citizenship, and I felt like that was a nice bookend. It starts with my arrival, it ends with citizenship, and then there's a special extra bit right after citizenship where I'm actually engaging with the process of citizenship, which I felt was very important. But I started writing the book in 2015, so really I started writing it around the time like that story was ending. And I finished writing the book actually the start of this year. It came out in June, so there was a lot of rewriting that happened over the Christmas holidays last year.
Oh, yeah. That's familiar.
But really, in terms of, I mean, actually, I was writing it at the time of the bushfires and feeling, I guess, sort of selfishly relieved that I didn't have to think of something, you know, smart and meaningful to say while all that was going on, because that was so devastating and upsetting and so raw at that time. So I was really glad the book was ending in 2016. And yeah, it's like the bushfires and how they changed Australia. That particularly that past season. I hope that means issues, you know, certain issues like traditional burning are going to be taken far more seriously. But in terms of how Australia's changed, part of what I tried to look at in the book, just slightly, just hinting at it, is that, you know, for all the bad issues that I raised, the complex, difficult, challenging things that Australia is grappling with, there are ways that Australia has changed in a really, really positive way. And when the book ended in 2016, for example, same-sex marriage wasn't legalized, and now it is. And so the book sort of hints at that, and it says like, oh, you know, this is a thing. When we came from Canada, it had been legalized for so long there that it was sort of like stepping back in time. This like, I was like, oh wow, I never would have guessed that wasn't also legal here. So I wanted to show that, you know, we are changing, we can change, and we are capable of that. And yeah, I'm really, I guess in that sense, proud to be part of a country that is willing to make those, have those hard debates. And
yeah.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you use the word we, because you are clearly now Australian, obviously a citizen as well, as I am too. But there's an interesting little segment in the book where you mention back home. And obviously that was a while ago, but do you ever catch yourself still sort of saying that, meaning Canada? Because your parents are still in Winnipeg, is that right?
It is right, yes, absolutely. All my family is in Canada, and same with Steve's family. And we do, yeah. I was just saying yesterday, we were supposed to be going home for Christmas this year, and of course we are not, and we're not sure when we're going to get home. And I think that we, you know, can have an understanding of home as, you know, multiplicitous. Like it doesn't have to be just one thing. It can be many things to any individual. And so I feel, you know, very lucky to have that sense of multiple homes, multiple places, because when I'm in Canada, I miss things about Australia and Sydney very, very acutely. It's the birds, like anywhere I go in the world that's not Australia, I'm just like, where are the birds and why are they not constantly making strange and wonderful noises?
And especially the kookaburras, right?
Oh, they still just light up my life. They're just.
We have to explain to people who haven't read the book yet that you and Steve, your partner, almost have a kind of ceremonial kind of reception. Whenever you hear kookaburras, you go into a moment of silence, right? To just
exactly, and we still do that. We're talking, like either of us, we hear a kookaburra, we'll stop, and we will both stand there and we'll listen. Like even if we can't see the bird, it's just like this moment of just gratitude for how wonderful the world can be.
It's an extraordinary sound. Where I live on the coast of northern metropolitan Adelaide, you don't really get kookaburras here, and I hear them more often in Sydney. But I have to say, when I hear them, I start laughing. I find them just very joyful. And I think this has been mentioned before when you've been interviewed about the book, but an amazing discovery was that monkey sounds in Hollywood movies are actually not monkeys, right?
So yes, the first time I heard kookaburras, I did not see them. I was walking across Sydney Uni campus and I heard this sound, and I started looking around and my brain went, I didn't know there were monkeys in Australia. They're invasive. Like somebody brought them here probably to shoot, the British bringing in their animals to go on their
British.
Because one fact that was in the book for a long time, but I think was pulled at the last minute. Someone brought over 12 moose from Canada, from North America, but let's assume Canada. Someone brought over 12 moose and just let them loose in Western Australia, hoping that they would breed, and then, you know, we can have our moose hunting out in the outback. And apparently they did not survive, although there are still rumors of wild moose in Western Australia, which is just one of my favorite facts. But going back to kookaburras, I assumed this was monkeys, and then I kept walking, and my brain was sort of ticking that over, and then I thought, oh, no, wait, that was kookaburras. Like, I just heard them for the first time. I called them kookaburras at that time. And I just thought, oh, wow, Ashley, you're not very smart. Like, why did you think that was monkeys? But then I was doing some research into this, and yes, as you said, a Hollywood producer at some point decided that kookaburras sound more like monkeys than monkeys themselves do. And so when they're doing a jungle scene setting shot in a lot of movies, you won't see them, but you'll just hear like this sound in the background, which as a North American, I was trained by Hollywood to believe was monkeys, because, you know, in the Costa Rican jungle or wherever Indiana Jones is, you're assuming that, well, obviously there's monkeys there. And so Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jumanji, like all those kind of movies, you will hear that sound. And so I thought this was more of a recent thing, but then I've done some more research. This goes back to the 1930s. Apparently the Tarzan movie and The Wizard of Oz used the kookaburra sound. So this has been a long running con that's been running on people out of Hollywood. So yeah, pay attention to that sound.
I hope the kookaburras are getting their paid dues, you know, for their voices being used for licensing. But that was a fascinating fact I read. I had no idea. You know, this is the strange thing really about, in a way, I'm sort of segueing into the idea of perceptions of Australia before you come here. And certainly for the UK, because of Paul Hogan's ad campaign, you know, where the bloody hell are you? And throw a shrimp on the barbie. And you just imagine everyone, well, not quite, but, you know, the idea of Crocodile Dundee and corks off hats and throwing shrimps on barbies and women being called Sheila. And of course you get here and it's very, very far from the truth. So, you know, how long did it take you you talk a bit about it in the book, but, you know, was there anything that your perception of Australia that you sort of continue to hold on to? I mean, many years after living here, is there nothing, everything sort of out the window in terms of what you thought Australia would be?
That is a great question. I think one thing is, because you have these sort of, you know, especially when you're young, I at least had these static images of like what Australia was. And so almost like, you know, check boxes that I could tick off. And one of those was definitely visiting the Opera House. And like, you know, that's just this iconic image, like globally around the world, like, you know, that image is associated with Sydney. And going to the Opera House, just not to attend an event, but just physically being in that vicinity, when you've got that view of the harbor with the bridge and the Botanic Garden and Milson's Point across the way and the ferries going past. And every time I go there, I just feel that same joy, particularly because, and I mentioned this in the book, you can, any day of the year, I mean, maybe it's different this year because I actually I haven't left the house much this year, as I'm sure many people have not. But you can go there and you can see people who are clearly there for the first time, and they're so excited to be there. Like, they're clearly like achieving a dream that they've had, you know, they probably spent a lot of money to get there, and they're getting their photo taken, and they're just joyful. And you can just go and like a vampire just like suck up their joy and be like, oh, look, I'm here. It's just magical. So that's definitely something. And I think, you know, when I actually get out into the outback, like I went to Uluru, and, you know, you feel that real sense of that you're in just a really special and unique place. So yeah, a few things like that. But I'm very disappointed in the snakes. Like, man, I thought there would be snakes everywhere, and I still not had a personal encounter with a snake. And someone needs to talk to whoever's in charge of snakes in this country, because they're not living up to their reputation.
I think the people who find them in their toilets in their kitchens probably would disagree with you there. I think maybe you need to spend some more time up in Queensland, but we get them here, just along the coastal path here.
Right, okay.
I was running down there once, and I had a runner stop suddenly in front of me and say, "Watch out!" And there was a brown snake coming across. So yeah, come and meet some snakes and sharks and redbacks in South Australia, because you haven't yet made it over here.
I spent one day in Adelaide, which isn't in the book because I wasn't there long enough to have a compelling story to put. So we drove from Adelaide to the Great Ocean Road, which was wonderful and amazing. And I did get one really good story out of that, which is the Birdman of the Kurong.
Yeah.
Because we went through the town of, I'm not going to pronounce this right, Meningi.
Actually, I'm not sure. Is it Meningi? Tracy, how do you pronounce it?
It's Meningi.
Meningi.
Great, thank you, Tracy. Yes.
I'm ashamed I can't pronounce it yet.
We went through Meningi and saw the Birdman of the Kurong statue and just felt instantly in love with him. He is amazing.
That is an extraordinary story. I love that. I'm not sure if everyone listening, South Australians, I've mentioned this to South Australians, and some people don't know about the man who rode an emu, right?
The brief rundown of the Birdman, but you can go, because it's not that far, I think, from memory, from Adelaide. So you can go there and get your photo. There's a life-size statue. So the Birdman of the Kurong was Irish. He was this really, really tiny guy, like 4 feet or something. And he was a bushranger, and he's my favorite bushranger because he rode around on emu back, and he would rob people. Apparently, he loved to rob women of jewelry, and then he would wear the jewelry riding around the emu. And they think he had, in today's money, like $1 million worth of jewelry. And he was notorious and whatever. But then one day, he tried to rob somebody, and the guy had a gun and shot him, and he took off. The Birdman took off on his emu and raced into the Kurong. And this is why he couldn't be caught, is because the Kurong is a sandy marsh, and so horses can't make a lot of traction on that. So this guy, whenever he was being chased, he would take off into the Kurong and get away on his emu, because the emu could go so fast over this terrain. So this guy, he was shot and he was bleeding, but the emu was racing away, and he raced off into the Kurong. And the guy who shot him tried to pursue on his horse. And he could see that this guy was bleeding really, really heavily. And so he was like pretty sure, he's like, there's no way he's going to survive that out there, not getting any help, medical help. And he was never seen again. So apparently his body is out there somewhere in the Kurong with all this $1 million worth of jewelry. And you can go and you can take a metal detector and try to find it. Now this, I'll put an asterisk on this story, which is that it may be entirely apocryphal. And I don't care. He's still my favorite bushranger, real or fictional.
It really is a great story. I was told that by one of the guides when you go on a boat down to the Murray Mouth, because it's quite hard to navigate. So you do need someone who knows what they're doing. And we'd walk across the sandy flats to that beautiful stretch of part ocean, part land at the Kurong. It is an absolutely stunning place. And he told us this story. But the image he painted was, not only was he wearing the jewelry, but was also fond of the ball gowns that he robbed from the
I didn't know that detail.
Some vibrant pink silk ball gown as he rode the emu. And I just think what a fantastic story, whether true or not. So yeah, it's I think I certainly enjoy the sort of incredibly colorful stories and legendary stories of Australian sort of recent history. But, just now, I'm not sure how many people listening actually had not heard the story of the Birdman of the Kurong. But, as an outsider, I mean, the subtitle underneath How to Be Australian is an outsider's view on life and love down under. So in your view, in what ways do you feel as an outsider you've brought an understanding of Australian culture to Australians, apart from what you've already mentioned, which is, those serious issues? But how do you think your outsider viewpoint will sort of tickle Australians?
Well, I think that's the thing, is that because I'm an outsider, I pay attention to things that, like, if you've grown up here, you probably have just learned to overlook, just because they've been there your whole life. And after I wrote this book, I realized, wow, I wish someone had written this book about Canada that I could have read when I was younger, a teenager or in my early 20s, because I think it would have given me a different perception of my own country and made me look around at it differently. And I love Canada, but I think, when you grow up there, you just, the hard things are the things that you pay attention to, particularly the weather. And I met up with another Canadian reader who got in touch with me, she was like, I think I'm your twin. I'm like, an Armenian Canadian who moved here to attend the University of Sydney with my husband. so we met up for coffee, and we were talking about how just hard Canadian winters are, in terms of, the amount of clothing you've got to have, and how hard it is on your vehicle, and that you've got to switch out your tires for snow tires, and all this stuff. So you pay attention to the hard things. But when I came to Australia, I started to pay attention to all the stuff that I really loved, and that I've just found so interesting, for like that kookaburra sound, for example. Never would have given that a second thought living in North America. Or the Birdman of the Kurong. Like, a lot of Aussies don't know that story, and I just delight in sharing it with them. Or the fact that there is a kangaroo gargoyle at Sydney Uni, the sandstone quadrangle, built to, in like the image of Oxford. And all these traditional gargoyles, looking real serious and mean and menacing. And then just right over one of the main entrances, there's this kangaroo just hanging out with the rest of the gargoyles. And to me, that's the Australian humor, just like distilled into like one perfect image. I just love those things. So
you coined a new term, because you called it a rugoyle, I think.
Rugoyle, yes, because it's not a kangaroo gargoyle. It is very much a rugoyle. So I wish there were more of them. It would be amazing if they were all rugoyles.
And I have not observed that in the campus. I'll have to look out for that next time I'm passing. Oh, I like the mug. But also the one in Canberra. So you mentioned the very masculine aspect of that kangaroo, which sort of tied in quite nicely with the gift that Steve bought you at one point.
Oh yes, that's a good connection. Yes, the stainless steel coat of arms over the main entrance to Parliament House. And this was in the ABC News, because I think a lot of Australians were really just puzzled by it. But if you missed that news story, it's always surprising to learn about it from an outsider. But yeah, the stainless steel coat of arms over Parliament House, the kangaroo, for some reason, is like quite outsized genitalia was included in the statue, because someone decided that the kangaroo had to be male, which is not in the coat of arms charter. And if you look at most renditions of the coat of arms, like, there's no gender to either of the animals. But I've never actually hadn't made that connection myself. But you can also buy kangaroo testicles that have been made into a coin purse, which is one of my favorite things about Australia. You go into certain tourist shops, that's an item you can purchase.
Strange gifts to give visitors. I have to say, there are lots of roos that you can come across relatively easily here in South Australia. Can you tell everyone I'm selling South Australia to Ashley, but koalas and I think it's just because we're not quite as populated and as busy as Sydney. But I have to say, when I first saw a kangaroo, I was absolutely blown away. They're just absolutely beautiful animals, wonderful animals. So I have so many more things I want to ask you, but we haven't got much time left. So I kind of really wanted to ask you two questions. One was, what next in terms of your writing? And then if you could then let us know what your top tips are for new reading of books, the many, many books that are emerging at the moment, having been delayed by the coronavirus. So what next?
Right, great question. I am currently working on a psychological thriller. So My Name is Revenge, as I said, the fiction portion of My Name is Revenge as a thriller. That is my true love when it comes to fiction. I read very widely, and I love nonfiction. I love memoir. Was I think what led me to write memoir, but I really truly love thrillers. And so I wanted to give a try at writing a full-length thriller. So that's what I'm working on now, and I'm reading a lot of books about the dark web. I'm reading a lot of books about trolling culture, men going their own way, and men's rights activists. So I'm really enjoying that research and writing process. So we'll see what happens there. But I'm not sure what is next. It could be that if I can pull it off. It could be more memoir. I'm really interested in writing about work and how people develop professional identities, because if you compare Steve and I in the book, you can see we're in terms of the way we've approached developing a profession and finding work that satisfies us with very different paths.
Because for Steve, sorry to interrupt, you say his work is very much a big part of his identity, and obviously as a writer it would be yours as well, but it's a sort of very broad kind of area. But sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was a great point. Yeah, and it was really interesting because when we first arrived, Steve was completely dislocated because he didn't have a job. As soon as he had a job in his profession, he was so much more relaxed and comfortable, and never ever had a qualm about belonging again. So we'll see what comes next. Will be a surprise to all of us.
I'll have to sign up to Ashley's social media accounts and just keep tabs on what she's up to next. And then very briefly, what books are you enjoying or recommending to us at the moment?
Excellent. Yeah, I want to recommend some debut authors. So this is Elizabeth Tan's Smart Ovens for Lonely People. It's a collection of short stories. It's just, if you've read, and I wanted to compare it, if you've read Julie Coe's Portable Curiosities, which was a debut book from a couple of years ago, really just memorable. I like to think of it as Technicolor short stories. I still remember them, so many of them, so clearly. Just bright and interesting, and but also really poignant. So I feel like Elizabeth Tan is writing in that tradition of Julie Coe, and so she's really exciting. I'm enjoying this collection a lot. And we're going to be, I do a podcast about writing, creativity, and health, and we're going to be interviewing Elizabeth Tan coming up soon. So I'm excited to speak to her about that.
Great.
I also want to recommend Hayley Katzen's Untethered. If you like memoirs and you interested in reading perspectives on Australia, Hayley is from South Africa, and she moved here. She urban academic who ended up living rurally on a cattle ranch and becoming a volunteer firey. So this book came out in June as well. It's really just fantastic writing, and a lot of connections with mine. Our books were actually reviewed together in Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. And of course, I am absolutely going to recommend The Things She Owned. If you haven't read it yet,
you're a sweetie. Thank you.
It's such a gorgeous book, and again ties into a lot of those themes in my first book, in My Name is Revenge, intergenerational trauma, and how we grapple with history, both on a personal and cultural level. So this is wonderful. And if you want to hear more of Katherine and I chatting, you can hear the reverse of this conversation where I get to interview Katherine on our podcast. So you just look up James and Ashley Stay at Home on your favorite podcast app, and you can hear me and my co-host talking to Katherine about this gorgeous book, which if you haven't read it, definitely go out and get it.
Oh, you're lovely. Thank you. That's lovely. There are some fantastic podcasts on there too. With you interview, you talk with Lee Kaufman as well, don't you? Which is a really fantastic interview. So, well, I think we're sort of running short of time, and I suspect there might be a few questions. So thanks so much, Ashley, and really fun to chat. We'll probably carry on chatting a bit, but maybe I'll ask Tracy to come in and maybe share some of the questions that people might have been posting in the chats.
For sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Ashley. And talking about what's next, so I just want to ask, as you discover more amusing stories about Australia, such as the Birdman of Kurong and the, the Arguile?
Yes, the Arguile.
The Arguile. Will you work these maybe into a follow-up part 2 book?
Well, those are in How to Be Australian, but I'm continuing to learn more. So it's something actually, an Australian author, Jay Martin, who has a book called Vodka and Apple Juice, which is about her and her husband, who are born and raised Aussies, going to live in Poland for 3 years. And so which is a gorgeous book and very funny, but also, grapples with, the history of the Holocaust in Poland. So another wonderful book. If you enjoyed my book or Catherine's, I think you'd enjoy Jay Martin's book. But she and I were talking, so she went and lived in Canada for 3 years after that and lived in Edmonton and lived through the winters. And she said, oh, maybe we should go and write we should just go and explore rural and regional Australia together and maybe look at writing a book about that. And I think that would be so much fun. So, when we can travel freely and safely again, that you never know, Tracy, that might be
good. Oh, that's good. Yeah, that does sound fun. There's lots of funny, interesting, amusing stories to discover in Australia, as you've been finding out. So anyway, we'll pop to some of these questions. You have answered the second part, I think, of this one from Judy. What is your favourite place you've visited so far in Australia, and have any of your family followed you here to live?
Oh, great question. Thank you. A favorite place is so hard because I love just discovering more and more of Australia. We were out in Coonabarabran recently, which is in regional New South Wales, and that's where the you get those really gorgeous. They have the observatory there, so because you get those really gorgeous views of the Milky Way, and that was beautiful. And then we drove from there out to the coast via Tamworth and through this state forest, and the drive was just beautiful. It was incredibly beautiful. I couldn't believe no one had told me, like, hey, go drive. I've forgotten that. I think it's the Oxley Highway, but it was gorgeous. But I think maybe my favorite place might have been Uluru. It was just really, really special. And I just felt so calm there. There's just this, just calm. I felt just radiating up from the ground. It was just a really gorgeous experience. And was there another part to that question that I've forgotten?
Yeah, I think you have answered it though earlier in your talk. Just have any of your family followed you here to live?
Yeah, no family has followed me here to live yet, because our parents, they all have grandchildren in Canada. So I think if grandchildren weren't a factor, they might be here with us, but we want to stay close to the grandkids for now.
Of course. Wendy says, have you noticed any similarities between Canada and Australia?
Oh, Wendy, yes. I mean, the similarities were one of the things that drew us here and created this false impression that, oh, Canada and Australia, basically the same place except for the weather. But obviously the language, the same language, we've got that same colonial history. I think, Canada has that reputation for being very nice and polite and kind. I actually think Aussies might be nicer. I have a whole theory about this that relates to the fact that in Canada, because we go through those real hard winters, it's hard to be nice and kind and polite. Maybe we don't get a lot of tourists at that time. Maybe that's why that hasn't snuck out in terms of our national reputation. But Aussies, because we have good weather so much of the year, I just find people here year round are friendly and polite and wonderful.
Oh, that is so nice of you. Lovely. Judy says, did you come across any specific challenges in writing the book? And are you working on another book at the moment, which we have already heard about as well?
Yeah, so specific challenges. I think one thing was definitely, writing about the more serious aspects that Katherine and I discussed. Those were the hardest parts of the book to write, in terms of getting the tone right, in terms of showing what I thought Australia would be like before I arrived. I did no research before coming here, so what my perception was, and then what I discovered living here, and sort of how those discoveries impacted my perceptions of Australia. Those were the most challenging parts to write. And technically, just in terms of the actual writing, finding a structure for the book, which, the book is really simple. It's chronological structure, but conceptually in my head, it started as a collection of essays. So making that transition from collection of essays around very specific topics to much more personal story of myself and my husband, it was quite a process to make that transition.
Ooh, sorry, I didn't realise I was muted. There we go. Just a comment from Beth. Hi, Ashley. I've been in Australia from Canada for 27 years and also haven't had an iced Vovo. She says mint slice is her favourite. And she's famous. Sorry. She's famous with her Aussie friends for Thanksgiving pumpkin pie next weekend.
Oh, Beth, you're gonna have to email me through my website or something and tell me where. Do you cook the pumpkin yourself, and which pumpkin? Because I found our cans of pumpkin at David Jones years ago in their imported food section. I can't find canned pumpkin, and my attempts to cook down the pumpkin have been watery and terrible. And I'm missing pumpkin pie like you would not believe. Please get in touch with me.
There's some in a shop in Adelaide, actually.
Really? Oh, Adelaide. Adelaide is where it's at.
Yeah.
As well as pumpkin pie, we've got snakes and pumpkin pie.
Oh, snakes? Yeah, brown snakes. I want this.
Carol, I think you've also answered Carol's question. What was the most difficult section to write and why?
Specifically, Carol, really specifically, there is a scene, I don't know if you've read the book, but there's a scene where I'm in the Blue Mountains, and it's when I'm trying to show when I first learned about the Australian treatment of asylum seekers currently, and just the shock of that, not going into too much detail, but just trying to convey the emotional weight of that, particularly, my great-grandparents were survivors of genocide, and so that, and I was actively researching that, writing a thesis on it for my master's degree at that time. So that scene went through a lot of iterations. I had a lot of people helping me with that scene. That one was really hard.
It succeeded.
Mm-hmm. We don't have any more questions from our listeners. So I don't know if you've got anything else, Katherine, you wanted to ask Ashley or share with us, Ashley?
I have a question for Katherine, which was if she had any debut authors that she wanted to share, to recommend to us.
Well, I've kind of been reading a lot around what I'm writing at the moment.
And what can I ask what that is?
It's very difficult to describe. I mean, I suppose for want of a better description, it's a food-based memoir, but it's a lot about seasonality in Japan and experiences of growing up in Japan. But there are a lot of issues that I talk about that will be familiar to you about where is home and what identity is, and where is home. Actually, that was a question I was going to ask you. So yeah, I'm kind of looking into aspects of Japanese food culture that I just took for granted but didn't fully understand. So when you said that there are some Australian people who are surprised by what you've written in How to Be Australian, when I look up certain things, I think, oh, okay, so that's what the English translation of that food is, or how it's grown, or what the issues are around that. So yeah, it's a non-fiction book. But in terms of...
Can I just say, if you haven't read Katherine's book, the descriptions of Japanese meals and cooking in her book were just one of my favorite parts. So beautiful, so evocative, and made me really hungry.
Well, you can tell I like my food, and so I enjoy writing descriptions of food. And this, I think, will have a few, I'll see how I can work it in, but a few recipes woven in as well.
I'm looking forward
but in terms of what I'm reading at the moment, I read your book again, really enjoyed that, but I've just started reading this, Kawakami Mieko's book, Breast and Eggs, and what I'm really excited about at the moment, I mean, we've always had English translations of Japanese authors, the traditional authors like Soseki Natsume Soseki, you have to say it the right way around, or Haruki Murakami, but that contemporary Japanese writers, Yoko Ogawa is another one. So The Memory Police, that's not quite so debut now, but it came out in an English translation earlier this year. And then this, Mieko Kawakami is extremely well known in Japan. She was extremely young when she was nominated for the Akutagawa Prize, which is one of the greatest literary awards in Japan. Mm-hmm. And her sort of description really of what it is to be a woman in Japan, hidden aspects that really run counter to lots of sort of general perceptions about Japan, I think is a really fantastic thing to read. What else? I've just got an older book, actually, Julianne Van Loon's The Thinking Woman. So that's a non-fiction book, which I'm really enjoying. And Yeah, I'm rather embarrassed to say that right now I have not been reading a huge amount outside of what I'm researching. So, but yeah, that's really.
Fun though. Get that next book out, Katherine. We're waiting.
I just need to get it out so I can sit and read to my heart's content of anything I want to read.
One of the things they don't tell you about being an author, like and being in the community, is that all of a sudden, like you have to be reading certain things, A, for research, and B, so that you like can talk about, you know, you do events like this. So suddenly you're like, your free reading time is slim to nil.
Really, really slimmed down. I do find that that was a surprising discovery and quite frustrating actually. And I sort of I'm enjoying writing the book mostly. I try and get out of that mindset of it's a huge struggle.
There's desiccated coconut all over my desk right now. It's just like that one cookie. Just like
that says it all. I think I definitely have to go and eat nice Vovo now.
Report back. I need a report.
Don't get it into your keyboard. But yeah, the book is quite pressing at the moment because the deadline for the first full draft is next week.
Well, gee, thank you for doing this.
I tell you what, it's really nice because this is another thing, right? One of the tricky things about navigating a new manuscript is that you need your break to have a rest outside as well, which doesn't quite stretch to the time you'd like to read completely unrelated books.
Yes.
But it's those, I find, actually, this will segue nicely if we have time, which I think we do, question into kind of the way you write. Because I've been thinking a lot about generative writing processes and random bits of synchronicity where you'll hear someone talk about something and it relates to what you're writing, or you pick up a book and the page opens amazingly at something that makes you go bing. So tell us a little bit about your writing process, you know, from first draft to finish, the hard yards at the end. But
oh my gosh, we could probably spend a whole hour talking about this.
5 minutes.
Yeah. But it's changed a lot. So one of the reasons the book ends in 2016, it was a good fit, but it worked out also very well because at the end of 2016, I started to become very ill. I was, and then the next year I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which is why the podcast that I do is partly about health. My co-host also has a chronic illness. And so my writing process has changed a lot since then. Yeah. So right now I'm finding actually it's interesting because I'm actually struggling the most that I have probably since I started writing regularly. Yeah. And it's simply because the illness is so unpredictable and so volatile. And just when I think that it's, you know, that I can develop a routine, something changes. And so right now I'm finding actually that all of that a bit of a struggle, and I'm trying just to return to just the joy of sitting down and just playing with my ideas, because I'm not anywhere near, you know, a deadline, a complete first draft. I feel like so much of myself has been stripped away by illness. And that was also part of, you know, this book evolving. When I said it started as a pure comedy book, at the time I was doing stand-up comedy, but that was one of the first things that the illness stripped away from me, was that I didn't have the energy to go and perform in the evenings. So I was, you know, going to bed much earlier, and I couldn't suddenly, you know, things that I had memorized and that I'd performed many times, I was tripping over the words because I couldn't remember them. So yeah, there's a whole other story about how my identity then was completely changed after this book. And again, that's a topic that perhaps at some point I might write about, but I feel like it's still too raw. Like the illness is still affecting me too much. And I share about that, you know, in the podcast and also on social media. I'm actually like sort of trying to put numbers around how much of my time and how much of my, you know, life has been lost to the illness, which is challenging to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very, very difficult to manage.
Mm-hmm.
You feel you need that energy to write. So I really hope that you start to feel that you're going through a more energetic phase soon, because
thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah,
and, you know, you wouldn't know it. You're sitting there smiling and I'm sure giving out lots of energy talking to us now, but yeah, I wish you well with that. And
I had a nice big coffee before we started, so
I think it, you know, there'll be other people also struggling with chronic illness at this time, but I think it's so important right now for everybody to take very, very good care of themselves and acknowledge when they need to rest, and you know, whether that's eating ice vovos or reading fiction, you know, in one way or another. I think we all need to really look out for ourselves and for each other as well. So I do hope you feel a better pretty soon.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, we've got another minute and a half to go, and I thought I think Tracy's been posting links to your website and your social media, but I should just say to everybody that Ashley's absolutely brilliant on social media. I've actually backed off quite a bit for my own kind of mental health reasons. I've had to sort of step back a little bit, but I do know that Ashley's engagement with Instagram particularly is really, really fun and enjoyable. So make sure you follow Ashley on Instagram, and your website is also inspiring for me because I still haven't got mine together, unfortunately.
Thank you.
But I
will say, if anybody's in a book club or knows people in a book club, I have a free book club discussion guide on my website, so you can download that as a PDF. And also, I have created some themed cocktails that go with the books. If you want to have a really fun book club night, go on my website and find those recipes. I highly recommend. Here's something a lot of Australians don't know about, but there's lemon myrtle is a traditional bush flavor, and there are distilleries in Australia that do a lemon myrtle liqueur, which is just my favorite thing. And just that with some tonic or soda water, just, oh my gosh, brilliant. So Baker Williams Distillery in Mudgee, they do an amazing lemon myrtle liqueur, which you can get posted out to you. So I highly, if you like to have a cocktail, and often when I do an event, I'll actually have one, but 10:30 in the morning felt a bit early to be pulling out the cocktails. So I stuck with the team Vicky's today.
Thank you for that tip. I think that what's not to love, really? Cocktails and book clubs, you know.
Yes.
That does sound amazing. Sorry, I have to chime in there. Wow, that sounds so good. I don't think you need the book club just to have the cocktail.
Book. Exactly. You can, actually, one of my readers posted that she'd gotten the lemon myrtle liqueur, and she posted a picture of herself drinking that and reading. And that just made me so happy. That as an author, I felt like that was a high watermark for me.
I actually manage the book clubs here for the City of Marion Library Service, so I will pass all of that information to our 25 groups, and I will also arrange to buy 8 of your books as a new set for our lovely groups to read next year, which I've also done with Catherine's book, The Things She Owns. So yes, and I will send the recipe for some of those cocktails along with that set to our book groups.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tracy. That's so exciting.
I guess at an hour, if there's anything else you wanted to add, Ashley, I'm not sure, but it sounds like maybe Tracy, is this sort of wrapping up time?
It is, unless there was anything else, Ashley, you wanted to leave us with today.
Just to say thank you to both of you, Katherine. That was a fantastic set of questions. It was such a joy talking to you about this. I'm so glad we've gotten to do this now. And thank you, Tracy. This was a fantastic event, and it's so great to see, City of Marion Libraries supporting Australian authors like this and doing these kinds of events. And thank you to everyone who came out to listen today. It was just a real joy to get to share these things with you. So thank you.
Great, excellent. So yes, that is it for the time we have today. So we don't want to keep you ladies any longer. I know Catherine's got to get onto that food-based memoir, because when she finishes that, she's going to come and visit us and talk about that in person with the City of Marion Libraries. And we look forward to having you back, Ashley, with your next book as well. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today. It has been a delight and a pleasure, and for introducing us to your funny, honest and thought-provoking book, which sounds an absolute delight to read. And it certainly sounds like you've adapted to the eccentricities of the Australian life, of which there are many. So I've got my copy ready to go and can't wait to start reading it. over a Tim Tam Slam or something like that. And again, thanks for sharing your debut Vovo venture with us too. It was wonderful.
It was so gross.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So bad.
Ashley's book can be purchased, and Katherine's as well, at Imprints Booksellers in the city and Matilda's Bookshop in Stirling, or from your local bookstore. So please support local. And of course, it can be borrowed from your library as well. And please keep following the Marion Library's Facebook page, the City of Marion website, and check your inbox to be kept up to date on all of the upcoming Library Through the Lens presentations and workshops. So thank you again for joining us this morning. We hope you will join us at our next presentation. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks very
Great
much.
to see you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.